Hi, and welcome to another installment of First Chapter Friday. To celebrate Poetry Month, we're going to be taking a look at various novels in verse from our tween fiction collection, starting with a story about 12-year-old Reena, who's expecting nothing but beaches, blueberries, and all the lobster she can eat when her family moves to Maine. Instead, she and her brother Luke are volunteered to work for their eccentric neighbor who has a whole host of very interestingly named animals, including one very ornery cow named Zora. Take a listen to the first couple of poems from Moo by Sharon Creech.
That Zora. The truth is, she was ornery and stubborn, wouldn't listen to anybody, and selfish beyond selfish, and filthy, caked with mud and dust, and moody. You'd better watch it, or she'd knock you flat. That's Zora I'm talking about. Nobody wanted anything to do with her. Zora, that cow. But first, before Zora, I am Reena, 12 years and 2 months old, formerly of a big city, a city of monuments and people of many colors, a harlequin city of sights and noises, of museums and parks and music, and cockroaches and rats and mosquitoes and crickets, and fireworks and traffic, and helicopters whopping overhead and sirens screaming through the air. And that's how we lived for a time. Me and my parents and brother zooming on the subway or creeping along in buses or cars, in, to, and around the city, trawling through the museums, ogling the dinosaurs and artifacts, ambling through the zoo, listening to the roars and screeches and scrabbles and warbles, staring at the lazy crawls of bored animals. Yes, for a time, that's how we lived. Flight path. Then one day, when we were stuck in traffic behind a tall gray bus spewing exhaust, with horns honking and people yelling and sirens wailing, on a day that was hotter than hot, my mother asked my father a question. A question can swirl your world. My parents had recently lost their jobs when the newspaper they worked for went out of business. We were on our way to drop my father off at another job interview. "So," my mother said, "do you still like reporting?" "Not much," my father admitted. "Is that what you see yourself doing 10 years from now?" Because that's the flight path we're on. I was sitting in the back seat with my brother Luke, a 7-year-old complexity. Sometimes he acted as if he were 2, and sometimes 12. He was full of questions and energy and opinions, except when you wanted him to have any of those things. Luke was drawing with a black marker in the yellow notebook that was nearly always with him. He drew for hours and hours, contorted heroes leaping and jumping and vaporizing, bizarre enemies with gaping mouths and sharp talons and horns, and complicated towns with alleys and bridges and dungeons. In the car, when Mom said, "Because that's the flight path we're on," Luke said, "Flight path? We're not in an airplane, you know. We're in a car, and we're on a road." But I noticed that he was adding a runway and an airplane to his drawing. Drivers all around us were honking their horns like crazy, and the smells and the heat and the noise were pouring in the windows and squeezing us from all sides. "Let's get out of here," my mother said. My father took his hands off the wheel and raised his palms to the sky. "No, I mean out of this city," my mother said. "Let's move." "To Maine," I said. My parents turned to look at me. Then they looked at each other. Then they looked at me again. "Maine," they said. "Of course." My parents had met in Maine many years ago, and when they spoke of Maine, their voices had the glint of sea and sky. In the car that day, Maine just popped out of my head. I hadn't expected they would take me seriously. I'm glad I didn't say Siberia. Which is how I came to meet Zora, though not quite so easily as it might sound, because first we had to give our landlord a month's notice, and then we had to clear out all our closets and cupboards and the dreaded storage garage. Then we had to lug some of that outside for a yard sale and the rest to the Salvation Army. And then we had to clean and watch as future renters tromped through our rooms, noting how small they were and how old and how dark. And it was embarrassing. And then there was the packing and moving of the beds and clothes and books and pots and pans. Oh, it hurts my head to remember it. So let's skip it.
So, now you know why and how Reena's family decided to move to Maine, which is sure to be much different from their lives in the big city. To continue the story, you can check out Moo by Sharon Creech from our Tween fiction collection, or it is available for immediate download through the Hoopla app. So once again, I would like to thank you all so much for listening and wish you happy reading.